The scorching Arizona sun beat down mercilessly as Sophia Anderson clutched her Bible tightly, fighting to stay conscious in the stifling heat of Oro Blanco's modest wooden church. The summer of 1878 had brought record temperatures to the small mining town, and the crowded Sunday service only intensified the suffocating atmosphere. The preacher's words began to blur as black spots danced before her eyes. The last thing Sophia remembered was the concerned faces of the congregation turning toward her as she swayed in the pew, her white cotton dress suddenly feeling like a lead weight dragging her down into darkness. Ethan Walker had noticed the beautiful young woman from his position at the back of the church, where he always stood rather than sat. At 26, he'd spent enough years trailing cattle and breaking horses to feel uncomfortable in confined spaces. His eyes had been drawn to her golden hair neatly pinned beneath a small bonnet, and the way she followed the sermon with genuine attention. When her face suddenly paled and her body went limp, he moved without thinking. "Miss." He called out, pushing past two elderly women to reach her side as she crumpled toward the rough-hewn floor. Strong arms caught Sophia before she hit the ground. Through her haze of semi-consciousness, she felt herself being lifted, cradled against a broad chest that smelled of leather, sun-warmed cotton, and horses. The congregation's murmurs faded as cool air suddenly touched her flushed skin. "Someone get Doc Miller," Ethan commanded, his voice steady despite his racing heart. He carried the young woman to the shade of a nearby cottonwood tree, carefully laying her on the grass. Mrs. Harriet Thompson, the preacher's wife, hurried over with a handkerchief soaked in water from the horse trough. "Poor dear," she clucked, pressing the damp cloth to Sophia's forehead. "It's this dreadful heat. I told Thomas we need more windows in that church." Ethan knelt beside the unconscious woman, his weathered hat in his hands. "Does anyone know who she is?" he asked, unable to tear his gaze from her delicate features. "That's Sophia Anderson," Mrs. Thompson replied. "Just arrived from Boston last month to live with her uncle, Mr. Prescott, after her parents passed. Poor thing's been through so much." Sophia's eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes the color of a clear spring sky. For a moment, confusion clouded her gaze before embarrassment flooded her cheeks with color. "Oh my," she whispered, attempting to sit up. "I'm so sorry for the disturbance." "Easy now," Ethan said, his voice gentler than he'd intended. "You fainted in there. Best stay put till the doctor arrives." "I don't need a doctor," Sophia insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. "It was just the heat." Ethan offered a smile that transformed his sun-hardened face. "Then at least let me take you home." "Where do you stay, Miss Anderson?" "With my uncle, Maxwell Prescott. His store is on—" "I know where Prescott's general store is," Ethan interrupted. "I'm Ethan Walker." Recognition flickered in her eyes. "The rancher from Copper Creek." He nodded, surprised she'd heard of him. "That's right. Uncle Max mentioned you. He said you're fair with your business and—" She paused, a small smile touching her lips. "Uncommonly stubborn when it comes to getting the right price for your cattle," Ethan chuckled. "Your uncle knows me well." Doc Miller arrived, his medical bag in hand, interrupting their conversation. After a brief examination, he confirmed what they already suspected: heat exhaustion, exacerbated by a too-tight corset and the crowded church. "Get her home to rest, give her plenty of water, and she'll be fine," the doctor prescribed, closing his bag. "Though I suggest looser garments for church in the summer months, Miss Anderson." Sophia's blush deepened. "Thank you, doctor." "I'll take you home," Ethan said, standing and offering his hands. When she tried to stand and swayed unsteadily, he didn't hesitate. "Forgive my boldness, Miss Anderson." With that, he scooped her into his arms again. "Mr. Walker," she protested weakly, "I can walk." and risk you fainting again. Your uncle would have my hide." He carried her toward his horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion waiting patiently at the hitching post. "Besides, it's no burden, you're light as a feather." "People are staring," Sophia whispered, mortified as churchgoers emerged into the sunlight. "Let them," Ethan replied with a wink. "Gives them something to gossip about besides Mrs. Peterson's questionable apple pie." Despite her embarrassment, a laugh escaped Sophia's lips. "That's terrible." "It's the truth. I nearly broke a tooth on her last offering." Ethan skillfully mounted his horse with Sophia secure in his arms, settling her sideways across the saddle before him. "Hold on now." The short ride to Prescott's general store was both the longest and shortest journey of Sophia's life. The solid strength of the cowboy's arms around her made her feel strangely secure, while his proximity sent her heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with heat exhaustion. Maxwell Prescott rushed out when they arrived, his face etched with concern. "Sophia, what happened?" "Your niece fainted during service," Ethan explained, dismounting before gently lifting Sophia down. "Doc says it's the heat, nothing serious." "Oh, my dear girl," Maxwell fretted, leading the way into the store and through to the living quarters in the back. "I should have insisted you stay home today. The church is an oven in this weather." "I'm fine, Uncle Max, truly," Sophia assured him, though she didn't protest when Ethan continued to carry her all the way to the settee in the small parlor. As he set her down, their eyes met again and something unspoken passed between them. "Thank you, Mr. Walker," she said softly. "Ethan," he corrected. "And it was my honor, Miss Anderson." "Sophia," she returned with a smile. Maxwell cleared his throat. "I'm in your debt, Mr. Walker." "Please let me offer you something for your trouble." Ethan shook his head, settling his hat back on his head. "No trouble at all, sir. I'm just glad I could help." He turned to Sophia, his expression warm. "Rest well, Miss Sophia. Perhaps I'll see you around town when you're feeling better." "I'd like that," she replied, surprising herself with her boldness. After he left, Maxwell busied himself bringing Sophia water and fussing over her comfort. "That Walker boy is a good sort," he commented. "Built his ranch from nothing after coming here 5 years ago. Works harder than any man I know." Sophia nodded absently, her mind still on the feeling of being carried in those strong arms. "He seemed kind." "He is that," Maxwell agreed. "Lost his parents young, raised by an aunt in Texas before striking out on his own at 16. Been on his own ever since." "How do you know so much about him?" Sophia asked curiously. Maxwell chuckled. "It's my job to know about everyone in Oro Blanco, my dear. I'm not just a storekeeper, I'm the keeper of stories." He patted her hand. "Now rest, doctor's orders." But rest proved elusive, as Sophia's thoughts kept returning to the cowboy with gentle hands and eyes the color of warm whiskey. The following morning, Sophia insisted on resuming her duties at the store despite her uncle's protests. The bell above the door jingled just after noon, and she looked up from arranging a display of fabric to find Ethan Walker standing in the doorway, hat in hand. "Miss Anderson," he greeted, a hint of surprise in his voice. "I didn't expect to see you working today." "Mr. Walker," she returned, smoothing her skirts nervously. "I'm fully recovered, thank you. Glad to hear it." He approached the counter, his spurs jingling softly with each step. "I actually came to see your uncle about some supplies. He's just gone to the bank, but he should return shortly." Sophia moved behind the counter. "Perhaps I can help you," Ethan smiled. "I need coffee, flour, sugar, and, well, I have a list here somewhere." He patted his pockets before producing a crumpled piece of paper. Sophia accepted it, their fingers brushing momentarily. The contact sent a strange flutter through her chest. As she read through the items, she gathered them efficiently, familiar with the store's organization after a month of working alongside her uncle. "You seem to have settled in well," Ethan observed, watching her work. "I'm trying," she admitted. "It's very different from Boston." "I imagine so. Do you miss it?" Sophia considered the question as she measured coffee beans. "I miss certain comforts and the libraries. But there wasn't much left for me there after my parents died." "I'm sorry for your loss," Ethan said softly. "Thank you." She offered a small smile. "Uncle Max has been wonderful, and there's something honest about life here. In Boston, everything felt shrouded in propriety and pretense." Ethan leaned against the counter. "And we have no pretense in Oro Blanco." "Oh, there's plenty," Sophia laughed. "But it's a different kind. Here, a man's word and work seem to matter more than his family name or the cut of his coat." "That's true enough," Ethan agreed. "Though some fancy coats have started showing up since the mines started producing." Their conversation flowed easily as Sophia gathered his supplies. When Maxwell returned, he found them laughing over Ethan's tale of a particularly stubborn mule. "Mr. Walker," Maxwell greeted cheerfully. "I see my niece is taking good care of you." "Indeed she is, Mr. Prescott. You've got yourself a fine shopkeeper." Maxwell beamed proudly. "She's a quick study. Now, what brings you to town? Thought you'd be busy with that new herd." "Just restocking supplies." "The boys were complaining about the quality of my cooking," Ethan explained. "Figured real coffee might make up for my biscuits." "Your hands are lucky to have biscuits at all," Maxwell chuckled. "Most ranch owners don't do their own cooking." "Most ranch owners have wives," Ethan pointed out, then seemed to regret his words as color touched his cheeks. "Anyway, I should be getting back." Sophia tallied his purchases. "That's $2.45. Ethan paid, their fingers brushing again as he handed over the money. "Thank you, Miss Anderson." He turned to Maxwell. "Mr. Prescott, I was wondering if your niece might be permitted to join me for dinner at the hotel restaurant this Saturday." The unexpected invitation caught both Sophia and her uncle by surprise. Maxwell recovered first. "Well, that would be up to Sophia, I suppose." Ethan's gaze found hers, unexpectedly vulnerable beneath his confident exterior. "Miss Anderson, would you do me the honor?" Sophia's heart quickened. "I would be delighted, Mr. Walker." His smile was like sunrise breaking over the desert. "I'll call for you at 6 if that's suitable." "Perfect," she managed, returning his smile. After he left, Maxwell studied his niece with knowing eyes. "Well, well, seems you've caught the attention of one of Oro Blanco's most eligible bachelors. Uncle Max." Sophia protested, busying herself with reorganizing already neat shelves. "It's just dinner." "Of course, dear," he replied, not bothering to hide his amusement. "Just dinner." Saturday arrived with agonizing slowness. Sophia spent the afternoon preparing, grateful for the few nice dresses she'd brought from Boston. She chose a blue dress that her mother had always said matched her eyes, arranging her hair in a simple but elegant style. At precisely 6 o'clock, a knock came at the door. Sophia's heart leapt into her throat as her uncle went to answer it. She heard the murmur of male voices, then Maxwell called for her. Ethan stood in the small parlor, looking startlingly different in clean black pants, a crisp white shirt, and a tailored vest. His usually unruly brown hair was neatly combed, and he'd clearly visited the barber that day. But it was the look in his eyes when she entered the room that took her breath away. "Miss Anderson," he said softly, "you look beautiful." "Thank you," she replied, equally quiet. "You look quite handsome yourself, Mr. Walker." Maxwell cleared his throat. "You young people should be on your way. The hotel kitchen doesn't serve all night." He fixed Ethan with a stern look. "I expect my niece home at a reasonable hour, Mr. Walker." "Yes, sir," Ethan responded seriously. "You have my word." The Grand Hotel was Oro Blanco's finest establishment, built during the initial silver boom and maintaining a level of elegance that reminded Sophia, albeit faintly, of Boston. Heads turned as Ethan escorted her to a table in the corner, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. "Everyone's staring," Sophia whispered as they were seated. "That's because you're the loveliest woman in town," Ethan replied simply, as if stating an obvious fact rather than paying a compliment. Dinner was a revelation. Sophia discovered that, beneath the cowboy exterior, Ethan Walker was well-read and thoughtful. He spoke of books she'd assumed would be unknown to a rancher, discussed politics with nuanced understanding, and listened to her opinions with genuine interest. "How did a cowboy come to know so much about Emerson?" she asked at one point, genuinely curious. Ethan smiled. "My mother was a schoolteacher before she married my father. She brought her books west and made sure I read them all." His expression softened with memory. "Even after they died, I kept reading. Books were my companions on cattle drives and lonely nights." "I'm sorry about your parents," Sophia said gently. "It was a long time ago. Cholera took them both when I was 12. He shrugged, but she could see the old pain in his eyes. "My aunt did her best, but she had 5 children of her own." "So you left at 16, he nodded. "Joined a cattle drive north, learned the trade, saved every penny. Worked my way up from cowhand to foreman, then staked my claim here when I heard about the good grazing land." "That's quite an achievement." "It's been a lot of work," he acknowledged, "but the ranch is finally starting to thrive. I've got 8 hands working for me now, good men all of them." As they talked, Sophia felt herself drawn not just to Ethan's handsome features, but to his character, his determination, his intelligence, and his quiet strength. When he walked her home under a sky ablaze with stars, she found herself wishing the evening wouldn't end at her uncle's door. Ethan took her hand. "I've had a wonderful time, Miss Anderson." "So have I," she admitted. "And please call me Sophia." "Sophia," he repeated, as if testing the feel of her name. "Would you allow me to call on you again? I'd like that very much." He hesitated, then slowly raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Good night, Sophia." "Good night, Ethan," she whispered, her skin tingling where his lips had touched. She floated into the house, finding her uncle pretending to read in the parlor. "Had a good evening?" he asked, failing to hide his interest. "Wonderful," Sophia replied dreamily, sinking into a chair. "He's not what I expected." Maxwell smiled knowingly. "People rarely are, my dear, especially in the West." Over the following weeks, Ethan became a regular visitor at the Prescott home. He escorted Sophia to Sunday services, where she was careful to wear looser garments and bring a fan. They shared picnics by the creek that gave his ranch its name, rode horses through the stunning desert landscape, and spent long evenings on the porch swing discussing everything from literature to livestock. With each meeting, Sophia found herself falling deeper for the cowboy who'd carried her from the church that sweltering Sunday. And though Ethan was more reserved with his feelings, his actions spoke volumes. The way his eyes followed her, how he remembered every detail she shared, the gentle brush of his hand against hers when they walked. One evening in late August, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson, Ethan seemed unusually quiet. "Is something troubling you?" Sophia finally asked. He turned to face her, his expression serious. "I need to go to Tucson." "Oh." She tried to hide her disappointment. "Business?" "Yes, I'm meeting with a banker about expanding the ranch." He took her hand. "I'll be gone at least a week, maybe 2. "I see." Sophia squeezed his fingers. "Well, Oro Blanco will still be here when you return. And you?" His voice held an uncertainty she'd never heard before. "Will you still be here? The question surprised her. Where else would I be? Ethan's gaze dropped to their intertwined hands. I worry sometimes that you'll realize this rough mining town is no place for a Boston-bred lady. That you'll tire of the dust and heat and limited society. Sophia placed her free hand against his cheek, turning his face back toward her. Ethan Walker, are you suggesting I'm some delicate flower who can't handle a little dust? A smile tugged at his lips. No, madam. Not after I saw you help deliver Mrs. Johnson's calf last week without batting an eye. Then trust that I know my own mind. She held his gaze steadily. I have no desire to return east. My life is here now. Something flickered in Ethan's eyes, hope, perhaps, or resolve. Before Sophia could decipher it, he leaned forward and brushed his lips against hers in a kiss so tender it brought tears to her eyes. I've been wanting to do that since I carried you out of that church, he confessed, his voice rough with emotion. I've been wanting you to, she whispered back. The sound of a throat clearing interrupted them. Maxwell stood in the doorway trying to look stern despite the twinkle in his eye. It's getting late, Mr. Walker. Ethan stood quickly. Yes, sir, I was just saying good night. Maxwell responded skeptically. A rather lengthy good night. Uncle Max, Sophia protested, blushing furiously. I'll be leaving for Tucson tomorrow, Ethan informed Maxwell, straightening his vest. I wanted to let you both know. Maxwell's expression softened. Business with the Territorial Bank, I presume? Yes, sir. I'm hoping to secure funding for additional acreage and cattle. Well, safe travels. Maxwell offered his hand, which Ethan shook firmly. We'll look forward to your return. After Ethan left, Sophia expected a lecture. Instead, her uncle simply said, He's a good man, Sophia. One of the best I know. I think so too, she replied softly. The days without Ethan stretched longer than Sophia had anticipated. She threw herself into work at the store, helped organize the church social, and volunteered at the small schoolhouse. But his absence left a hollow feeling she couldn't quite shake. When 2 weeks passed with no word, she began to worry. 3 weeks in, a letter finally arrived explaining delays with the bankers and apologizing for his extended absence. Business is progressing well, he wrote, but I find myself missing oro blanco, or more specifically, a certain shopkeeper with eyes like the Arizona sky. The letter sustained her through another week of waiting. When Ethan finally rode into town nearly a month after his departure, Sophia spotted him through the store window and had to restrain herself from running into the street to greet him. He came directly to the store, dust from the trail still coating his clothes, his face weary but brightening the moment he saw her. Sophia, he breathed, as if her name was both prayer and answer. You're back, she stated unnecessarily, drinking in the sight of him. I am, and I have news. His eyes danced with excitement. The bank approved everything. I've purchased the Henderson property that borders my ranch to the south, and I'm bringing in a herd of prime breeding stock from Texas. Ethan, that's wonderful. There's more. He glanced around, noticing several customers pretending not to eavesdrop. Can you get away for a bit? I'd like to show you something. With her uncle's blessing, Sophia joined Ethan for a ride out to his ranch. Copper Creek spread across a stunning valley, with mountains rising purple in the distance, and the creek itself cutting a green ribbon through the golden landscape. The main house was modest but solid, built of local stone and timber with a wide porch overlooking the property. It's beautiful, Sophia commented as they dismounted. It's about to get more beautiful, Ethan replied cryptically, leading her not toward the house but to a clearing nearby. This is part of why I was delayed in Tucson. In the clearing, foundation stones had been laid out in a large rectangle. Stacks of lumber and building supplies were neatly arranged nearby. What is this? Sophia asked, confused. This, Ethan said proudly, is going to be our new house. Our. The word hung in the air between them. Ethan took both her hands in his. I know this is sudden and perhaps not the proper way to go about things. I should court you longer, speak to your uncle first, present you with a ring. He took a deep breath. But I've never been one for convention and I can't wait another day to ask. Sophia Anderson, I love you. Will you marry me and build a life here with me? Joy bubbled up in Sophia's chest, overwhelming in its intensity. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes. Ethan's face split into a radiant smile before he pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the passion that had been building during their time apart. When they finally separated, both breathless, he pressed his forehead to hers. I do have a ring, he admitted. It was my mother's. It's in the house, if you'd like to see it. I would, she nodded, tears of happiness blurring her vision. And then we should go tell Uncle Max. Maxwell Prescott received the news with feigned surprise that fooled neither of them. I wondered what was taking you so long, Walker, he teased. Thought I might have to drop some hints. You knew? Sophia asked incredulously. My dear girl, he asked my permission before he left for Tucson. Maxwell's eyes twinkled. Said he wanted to make sure his prospects were solid before offering for your hand. Very proper of him. Ethan shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. I wanted to do right by you both. Maxwell clasped Ethan's shoulder. And you have, son, you have. The wedding was set for October when the worst heat of summer had passed, but before winter's chill arrived. The entire town of Oro Blanco turned out for the occasion, held in the same church where they'd first met. Sophia wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully altered by Mrs. Thompson and the ladies' sewing circle. Ethan, looking uncomfortable but handsome in a new suit, waited for her at the altar with undisguised awe as she walked toward him on her uncle's arm. You are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, he whispered when she reached him. Even prettier than your new Hereford bull. She teased softly. His laugh drew curious glances from the congregation. Even prettier than that, he confirmed. Their vows were simple and heartfelt. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan didn't wait for permission to kiss his bride. He gathered her in his arms, much as he had that first day, and kissed her to the cheers and applause of the entire town. The celebration afterward lasted well into the night, with dancing, feasting, and more than a few toasts to the new couple. When they finally departed for the ranch, riding together on Ethan's horse with Sophia's valise strapped behind them, a strange mixture of nervousness and excitement fluttered in her stomach. The house glowed with lamplight as they approached. Did you leave lamps burning? Sophia asked, concerned about fire. No, Ethan replied with a mysterious smile. I suspect we have well-wishers. Sure enough, when they entered, they found the house transformed. Fresh flowers adorned every surface. The table was set with Ethan's best dishes and a cold supper for two. And the bedroom. Sophia blushed when she glimpsed the turned-down bed strewn with wildflower petals. Mrs. Thompson, Ethan explained, noting her surprise. She insisted on preparing the house while we were at the celebration. Said no bride should have to worry about household matters on her wedding night. That was very thoughtful, Sophia managed, suddenly shy despite weeks of anticipation. Sensing her nervousness, Ethan took her hands. We don't have to rush anything, Sophia. We have all the time in the world. His consideration only made her love him more. I'm not afraid, she assured him, rising on tiptoe to kiss him softly. Just new to all this. So am I, he admitted, in ways that matter. Their wedding night was a tender exploration. Ethan's patience and gentleness easing Sophia's initial discomfort until pleasure replaced uncertainty. Afterward, lying in his arms as moonlight spilled through the window, She felt a sense of rightness and belonging she'd never experienced before. "I love you, Mrs. Walker," Ethan murmured against her hair. "And I love you, Mr. Walker," she replied, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. "More than I thought possible." Life as a rancher's wife proved both more challenging and more rewarding than Sophia had anticipated. The isolation took some adjustment after living in town, but she found joy in making their home a warm, welcoming place and in learning the workings of the ranch. She discovered an unexpected talent for bookkeeping, taking over the ranch accounts with an efficiency that impressed even Ethan. Winter came early that year, bringing harsh winds and freezing temperatures that tested both cattle and humans. Ethan spent long days in the saddle, working alongside his men to protect the herd, often returning after dark chilled to the bone. One particularly brutal evening in December, he came home during a snowstorm, his face raw from the wind and his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. "We lost 3 head today," he reported grimly as Sophia helped him out of his frozen coat. "If this weather keeps up, we could lose more." "You did everything possible," she assured him, guiding him to the chair nearest the fire. She knelt to remove his boots, ignoring his half-hearted protests. "The men are saying no one else could have saved as many as you have." "The men talk too much," he grumbled, but his expression softened as he watched her care for him. "What would I do without you, Sophia? Fortunately, you'll never have to find out." She placed a steaming bowl of stew before him. "Eat, then rest. Tomorrow will be soon enough to worry again." As winter deepened, a different worry emerged. Sophia had begun experiencing morning sickness, confirming what she'd suspected since missing her monthly cycle in November. She kept the news to herself initially, not wanting to add to Ethan's burdens during the difficult season. But as Christmas approached, she could no longer hide her frequent illness. "You're unwell," Ethan stated one morning, finding her retching into a basin. "I'm fetching Doc Miller." "No need," she managed, wiping her mouth with a damp cloth. "I'm not sick, Ethan, I'm with child." His expression transformed from concern to wonder in an instant. "A baby, you're sure?" she nodded, smiling despite her nausea. "Due in summer, I think." Ethan dropped to his knees beside her, placing a reverent hand on her still flat stomach. "A child," he repeated, voice thick with emotion. "Our child. Are you pleased?" she asked, suddenly uncertain in answer. He gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of porcelain. "Pleased doesn't begin to describe it. I'm overwhelmed, terrified, ecstatic." He pulled back to look into her eyes. "You've given me everything I never dared hope for, Sophia." The news of their coming child seemed to carry them through the remainder of the harsh winter. By spring, the worst was behind them, and the ranch had weathered the season with fewer losses than many neighboring properties. Sophia's belly had begun to swell visibly, and Ethan's protective instincts intensified accordingly. She often caught him watching her with a mixture of adoration and worry that both touched and frustrated her. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she reminded him one day when he objected to her carrying a basket of laundry. "Humor me," he replied, taking the basket anyway. "I've never had a pregnant wife before," she laughed. "And how many wives have you had, Ethan Walker?" "Just the one," he grinned, setting down the basket to pull her into his arms. "But she's more than enough woman for any man." As her pregnancy progressed, Sophia found herself drawn back to town more frequently, missing female companionship and her uncle's steady presence. Ethan, understanding her needs, made a point of bringing her to Oro Blanco at least once a week, often staying overnight in the rooms above the store so she could spend time with Maxwell and her growing circle of friends. During one such visit in late May, Sophia was helping in the store when the bell above the door jingled. She looked up to greet the customer and froze. The well-dressed man standing in the doorway was unmistakable, despite the years since she'd last seen him. "Richard," she breathed, one hand automatically moving to cover her prominent belly. Richard Blackwood's handsome face registered first surprise, then calculation as he took in her condition. "Sophia Anderson. What an unexpected pleasure." "It's Sophia Walker now," she corrected, instinctively backing away. "What are you doing in Oro Blanco?" "Business," he replied vaguely, approaching the counter. "Mining investments. I had no idea you'd settled in this quaint little town." His gaze lingered on her stomach. "Married and expecting, I see. How charming." The condescension in his tone made Sophia's skin crawl. Richard had been her father's business partner in Boston and had pursued her relentlessly after her parents' deaths, despite her clear disinterest. His persistence had been a significant factor in her decision to move west. "My uncle will be back shortly if you need assistance," she said stiffly. "If you'll excuse me." "Don't run off on my account," Richard smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. "I've often wondered what became of you after you disappeared so abruptly." "I didn't disappear. I informed your sister of my plans to join my uncle. Ah, yes, after declining my generous offer of marriage." He glanced around the modest store with obvious disdain. "I see you've downgraded your ambitions considerably." Anger flared hot in Sophia's chest. "On the contrary, I've found happiness beyond anything Boston could have offered. With some local yokel," Richard laughed. "My dear, you can't possibly be satisfied playing frontier wife when you were raised for so much more." Before Sophia could respond, the door opened again and Ethan walked in. He crossed to her side immediately, sensing her distress. "Everything all right?" he asked, eyes fixed on Richard. "Fine," Sophia assured him, taking strength from his presence. "Ethan, this is Richard Blackwood, a former associate of my father's from Boston. Mr. Blackwood, my husband, Ethan Walker." The two men sized each other up like wary predators. Richard extended his hand first, his smile now frozen in place. "Mr. Walker, you're a fortunate man to have won Sophia's hand." Ethan shook the offered hand firmly, perhaps more firmly than necessary. "I know exactly how fortunate I am, Mr. Blackwood." "Richard was just leaving," Sophia interjected, wanting the encounter to end. "Actually, I'm in town for several days," Richard countered smoothly. "Perhaps we could all dine together, for old time's sake." "We're returning to the ranch this afternoon," Ethan replied, his arm sliding protectively around Sophia's waist. "Another time, perhaps." Richard's eyes narrowed briefly before his social mask slipped back into place. "Of course. Another time." After he left, Ethan turned to Sophia. "Who was that really? And don't tell me just a business associate," Sophia sighed. "He was my father's partner. After my parents died, he proposed marriage, claiming it would save the family business. When I refused, he became persistent, uncomfortably so." Ethan's expression darkened. "Did he threaten you?" "Not explicitly, but he made it clear he wouldn't take no for an answer." She shuddered at the memory. "It was a relief to have a reason to leave Boston, and now he's here." Ethan's voice had a dangerous edge. "In our town." "It's probably just coincidence," Sophia said, hoping it was true. "Oro Blanco's mines have attracted Eastern investors before. Maybe." But Ethan didn't sound convinced. "Either way, I want you to be careful. Don't be alone with him." "I have no intention of being anywhere near him," she assured her husband. That evening, Ethan insisted they return to the ranch despite the late hour, unwilling to spend the night in town with Richard Blackwood nearby. The encounter left a shadow over the following days, though Sophia tried to dismiss it from her thoughts. A week later, Ethan needed to attend a cattle auction in a neighboring town. "I'll only be gone 2 days," he promised, kissing her goodbye. "Carlos will stay at the house and Mrs. Jimenez will come up from the bunkhouse to help with meals." "We'll be fine," Sophia assured him, patting her belly. "Baby and I will be right here waiting when you return." The first day passed uneventfully. On the second, Sophia was hanging laundry when she heard a horse approaching. Expecting Mrs. Jimenez's son, who often brought fresh eggs from their chickens, she was startled to see Richard Blackwood dismounting an expensive-looking stallion. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, instinctively backing toward the house where Carlos, their oldest ranch hand, was fixing a broken chair. Richard smiled that cold smile. "I came to see how the other half lives. I must say it's more rustic than I imagined. You're not welcome here, especially with my husband away. Please leave." He ignored her request, looking around the property with exaggerated interest. "You know, Sophia, it's not too late. This little adventure has clearly run its course. You're playing at being a pioneer woman, but we both know you were meant for greater things." "I'm exactly where I want to be," she stated firmly, "and I'm asking you to leave. Now." Richard's facade of civility slipped. "Don't be a fool. Look at this place, a tiny house in the middle of nowhere, a husband who's little more than a cowboy. What kind of life is this for a woman of your breeding? What kind of future will your child have?" "A future with parents who love each other in this land," she retorted. "Now go before I call for help." He took a menacing step forward. "There's no one to hear you out here." That's the problem with these isolated ranches. Fear shot through Sophia, but she held her ground. "You're wrong. Carlos," she called loudly. The door opened immediately, and Carlos stepped out, his weathered face taking in the situation at a glance. Though in his 60s, the Mexican ranch hand stood tall and strong, a hammer still in his hand. "Señora, is there trouble?" Richard's expression faltered. "No trouble, just a friendly visit." "It doesn't look friendly to me," Carlos observed, moving to Sophia's side. "The señora asked you to leave, I think." For a tense moment, Richard seemed to consider his options. Then, with a tight smile, he turned back to his horse. "We'll continue this conversation another time, Sophia, when circumstances are more favorable." "There won't be another time," she replied coldly. "Goodbye, Richard." As soon as he rode away, Sophia's knees nearly buckled with relief. Carlos steadied her with a gentle hand. "Who was that man, señora?" "Someone from my past," she explained. "Someone who should have stayed there." Carlos nodded gravely. "I will tell the other men to watch for him. No one will come near the house without us knowing." "Thank you, Carlos." Sophia squeezed his arm gratefully. "Please don't mention this to Ethan when he returns. I don't want him worried." The older man looked troubled. "The patron should know." "And he will," she promised. "But I'll tell him myself when the time is right." That opportunity never came. Ethan returned the following day full of excitement about the quality breeding stock he'd purchased at the auction. Seeing his happiness, Sophia couldn't bring herself to mention Richard's visit. The incident seemed over, and she told herself there was no need to worry Ethan unnecessarily. 3 days later, she realized her mistake. Ethan had ridden out at dawn to check on a section of damaged fencing. By mid-morning, Sophia was kneading bread dough when hoofbeats approached the house. Expecting Ethan, she wiped her hands on her apron and went to the door with a smile that died on her lips when she saw Richard Blackwood dismounting, accompanied by 2 rough-looking men she didn't recognize. "What do you want?" she called through the closed door, her heart racing. The ranch hands were all working distant sections of the property, and Mrs. Jimenez wasn't due until afternoon. "Just a conversation, Sophia," Richard replied, his tone reasonable though his eyes were cold. "Open the door." "Leave my property immediately," she commanded, grateful for the heavy oak door between them. "My husband will be back any moment." Richard's laugh held no humor. "We both know that's not true. My men have been watching the ranch. Walker rode north at dawn. He won't be back for hours." He nodded to one of his companions who moved toward the window. "Now, we can do this civilized or we can do it the hard way. Your choice." Terror gripped Sophia's heart as she realized his intentions. Moving quickly, she retrieved Ethan's shotgun from above the fireplace, loading it with shaking hands as she'd been taught. When the man attempted to force the window, she fired a warning shot into the air. "The next one won't miss," she shouted, her voice steadier than she felt. Richard's face contorted with anger. "Don't be stupid, Sophia. You can't win this. Come back to Boston with me now and I'll be generous. Stay, and I'll make sure there's nothing left of this ranch for your cowboy to come home to." "I'd rather die," she spat back, positioning herself behind the heavy oak table for protection, the shotgun aimed at the door. "That can be arranged," he snarled, gesturing to his men. "Break it down." As the men began ramming the door, Sophia silently prayed. The baby kicked inside her as if sensing her fear, and she placed one hand protectively over her belly. "It's all right," she whispered. "Papa will come." The door frame splintered with a sickening crack. One more hit would break it open. Sophia steadied the shotgun, knowing she would have to fire. Just as the men prepared for a final assault, gunshots rang out not from her weapon but from outside. "Get away from my house!" Ethan's voice roared, followed by another shot. The pounding stopped. Through the window, Sophia glimpsed one of Richard's men clutching his arm, blood seeping between his fingers. The other had his hands raised. Richard himself stood frozen, face pale with shock. "Sophia," Ethan called. "Are you all right?" "I'm here," she called back, voice shaking with relief. "I'm unharmed." "Step away from the door and keep down," he instructed. Moments later, the damaged door burst open, and Ethan entered, rifle at the ready, his face a mask of cold fury. Behind him, Carlos and two other ranch hands kept their guns trained on Richard and his men. "Ethan," Sophia cried, dropping the shotgun to run to him. He caught her with one arm, keeping his rifle raised with the other. "It's all right now," he murmured against her hair, before gently setting her aside to confront Richard. "Blackwood. Give me one reason I shouldn't put a bullet in you right now." Richard had recovered some of his composure. "This is all a misunderstanding. I merely came to speak with Sophia by breaking down my door with hired guns." Ethan's voice was dangerously quiet. "You came to abduct my wife." "She doesn't belong here," Richard insisted, desperation creeping into his tone. "She's wasting herself on this wasteland, on you." Ethan's finger tightened on the trigger, but Sophia placed her hand over his. "He's not worth it," she said softly. "He's nothing to us." After a long, tense moment, Ethan lowered the rifle slightly. "Carlos, ride for the sheriff. Tell him we've caught 3 men attempting abduction." "No need," came a new voice. Sheriff Dawson rode into the yard, followed by several deputies. "Got word from one of your hands that there might be trouble out here." As the sheriff took charge of the prisoners, Sophia turned to Carlos with questioning eyes. The old ranch hand shrugged. "I did not like the look of that man, so I watched. When he returned with others, I sent Miguel for the sheriff, then came to find the patron." "Thank God you did," Sophia breathed, embracing the startled man. "You saved us both." "It was nothing, Senora," Carlos mumbled, embarrassed but pleased. After the sheriff departed with Richard and his men in custody, Ethan finally set his rifle aside to properly embrace his wife. "Are you truly all right?" he asked, his hands gently checking her for injuries. "I am now," she assured him, though she couldn't stop trembling. I was so frightened, Ethan, not just for myself but for the baby. His face darkened. I should have killed him. No, she cupped his face in her hands. That's not who you are. You protect, you don't destroy. Ethan pressed his forehead to hers. When I saw them at our door, I've never felt rage like that. The thought of losing you. You didn't lose me. You saved me. She guided his hand to her belly where the baby kicked vigorously. You saved us both. That night, after the door had been temporarily repaired and the ranch hands had posted themselves as guards around the property, Ethan held Sophia close in their bed, his hand resting protectively over their unborn child. I never should have left you, he murmured into the darkness. You couldn't have known, she replied, and you came back when it mattered most. I always will, he promised. Whatever burden you carry, whatever threatens you, I'll be there to share the load. I know. She nestled closer into his embrace. That's why I love you. The next day, they rode into town to give their statements to the sheriff. Richard and his men faced serious charges, not just for the attempted abduction, but for other crimes discovered during the investigation, including fraud against mining investors that had brought him west in the first place. He'll be going to Yuma prison for a long time, Sheriff Dawson assured them. You won't have to worry about him again. As they left the sheriff's office, Sophia suddenly clutched Ethan's arm, her face contorting in pain. Ethan, she gasped. The baby. Alarm shot through him. What's wrong? I think it's coming, she managed between labored breaths. But it's too early. It's not due for another month. Ethan swept her into his arms without hesitation, carrying her swiftly toward Doc Miller's office. Hold on, Sophia. Everything will be fine. Don't leave me, she pleaded as another contraction gripped her. Never, he vowed, kicking open the doctor's door. Doc, it's my wife. The next 12 hours were the most harrowing of Ethan's life. Pacing outside the examination room, he heard Sophia's cries of pain and felt utterly helpless. Maxwell joined him in his vigil, the older man's quiet presence a comfort in the endless waiting. She's strong, Maxwell reminded him. Stronger than you know. She shouldn't have to be so strong, Ethan replied, his voice raw with emotion. It's my fault, the stress of yesterday, the confrontation. Stop that, Maxwell said firmly. Babies come when they come. Sophia wouldn't thank you for blaming yourself. Finally, as dawn was breaking, Doc Miller emerged looking tired but pleased. Congratulations, Mr. Walker. You have a son. Small but fierce, just like his mother. Relief flooded through Ethan, making his knees weak. And Sophia, exhausted but fine. You can see them now. Sophia lay pale against the pillows, her golden hair damp with sweat, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in white cloth. When she looked up at Ethan, her face glowed with a joy that transcended her exhaustion. Meet your son, she whispered as he approached reverently. Ethan gently took the swaddled infant, marveling at the perfect miniature features and the wisp of dark hair that promised to match his own. The baby's eyes, when they fluttered open briefly, were the same clear blue as his mother's. He's perfect, Ethan breathed, his voice thick with emotion. Absolutely perfect. I thought we might name him Maxwell after Uncle Max, Sophia suggested. Maxwell Carlos Walker. Tears filled Ethan's eyes. It's a fine name for a fine boy. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, one arm cradling his son, the other wrapping around his wife. Thank you, Sophia, for everything you've given me. We've given each other, she corrected softly, leaning against his shoulder. A family, a home, a future. They remained in town for 2 weeks, allowing Sophia time to recover and the baby to gain strength before making the journey back to the ranch. During that time, what had seemed like every resident of Oro Blanco came to offer congratulations and meet young Maxwell. When they finally returned home, they found the ranch hands had been busy in their absence. The door had been properly repaired, the house thoroughly cleaned, and a handmade cradle sat beside their bed. Carlos's work. They learned, carved during every spare moment. "Welcome home, little one," Sophia whispered as she laid the baby in his new cradle. "This is where you belong." Ethan stood in the doorway, watching his wife tend to their son, overwhelmed by the love he felt for both of them. 3 years ago, he had been a solitary man focused solely on building his ranch. Now, he was husband, father, provider, roles he had never imagined for himself, but that now defined his very existence. As summer turned to fall, baby Max thrived, growing stronger each day. Sophia recovered fully from the difficult birth, though Doc Miller warned that future pregnancies might be challenging and advised them to wait several years before considering another child. They settled into a new rhythm of life centered around their son's needs, discovering new joys and challenges in parenthood. The ranch prospered as well. The new breeding stock proved to be a wise investment, and the expanded acreage allowed for increased herd size. Ethan hired additional hands and built a larger bunkhouse to accommodate them. While he still worked alongside his men, he made a point of returning to the house earlier each day, unwilling to miss evenings with his family. When Maxwell Prescott began talking of retiring from the store, Ethan and Sophia offered a solution that benefited everyone. Max would come live with them at the ranch, helping with baby Max during the day and enjoying his retirement in the fresh air, while still making occasional trips to town to assist the new storekeeper Ethan helped him hire. "Are you certain you want an old man underfoot?" Maxwell asked when they proposed the arrangement. "Your family," Ethan said simply. "Besides, I can't think of a better influence for my son than the man who raised the woman I love." By Max's first birthday, the new house Ethan had begun building before their marriage was finally complete, a spacious 2-story home with plenty of room for their growing family, and for Maxwell, who occupied a comfortable suite of rooms on the ground floor. On a crisp October evening, 5 years to the day since Sophia had fainted in church and Ethan had carried her into his life, they sat on the porch of their new home watching little Max chase fireflies in the yard. "He has your energy," Sophia observed, leaning against her husband's shoulder. "And your determination," Ethan replied with a chuckle as the boy stubbornly pursued an elusive light. "God help us when he's older." "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked softly. "In the church?" "Often." Ethan took her hand, running his thumb over the simple gold band he'd placed there. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, even unconscious." Sophia laughed. "How romantic. It's true." His expression grew serious. "I knew somehow that my life had changed the moment I picked you up. I just had no idea how completely." "I knew too," she admitted. "When I woke in your arms, I felt safe, like I'd found something I hadn't even known I was looking for." Ethan kissed her softly. "I promised myself that day that I would always be there to carry your burdens, whatever they might be, and you have been." She rested her head on his shoulder, watching their son's laughter in the fading light. Every single day. As darkness fell, Ethan lifted a sleepy Max into his arms, carrying him inside while Sophia followed with a lantern. The boy's head drooped against his father's shoulder, small arms wrapped trustingly around Ethan's neck, an echo of that first embrace years ago. Later, with their son tucked safely in bed, they stood at the window looking out over their land, the ranch that had once been Ethan's solitary dream, and was now the foundation of their shared life. "I have something to tell you," Sophia said quietly, taking Ethan's hand and placing it on her stomach. "Doc Miller says it's safe now. We're going to have another baby." Joy spread across Ethan's face as he pulled her into his arms. "Are you certain?" She nodded, smiling through happy tears. "Due in spring. Doc says everything looks strong this time. Another child, he whispered in wonder. Another miracle. As Ethan held her in the moonlight, Sophia thought about the journey that had brought them here from a sweltering church in Oro Blanco to this moment of perfect happiness. How a single act of kindness, a cowboy carrying a fainting woman to safety, had set in motion a love story neither could have imagined. "Whatever comes," Ethan murmured against her hair, "we'll face it together." "Together," Sophia agreed, safe in the arms that had carried her through every storm. Always together. And in that promise was everything they had built, and all they had yet to build, a legacy of love that had begun on a scorching Sunday when a cowboy had carried not just a woman, but his own future, out of a crowded church and into the brilliant Arizona sunlight.